got asked an interesting question last week that's been stuck in my head ever since. Someone had seen my content about tearing the paper ceiling, and they asked me how I ended up where I am now. You know, since I don't have a degree. It is a pretty unique set of circumstances. Basically, for my first computer job, I bugged the shit out of someone until they hired me as a tester, and then I continued to bug the shit out of them to make me a developer because I was annoying all the other developers pointing out the problems in their code. And then my emotional issues got in the way, and I ended up leaving that place. That whole first job is an episode unto itself. Today, though, I'm here to share Chapter 2 first. Like a less interesting Tarantino movie. It does involve some chutzpah, some moxie, a bit of daring do, and 3 or 4 other turns of phrase no one uses anymore. Because honestly, nobody cares how I got back into IT. Full disclosure, I am joined in the studio this evening by resident dog Kevin Bacon, so you may hear some ancillary noise in the background. Like I said in the last episode, I knew a few things about what I wanted to do as a career when I was like 7 or 8 years old. My mom was a secretary most of her working life, so I spent a good number of Saturday and Sunday afternoons in the various offices where she worked. And on one of those days, my true love affair with technology began. In one of those offices, they had this machine. That old boy looked like the Lord of the Manor. There was something that just felt right about watching that machine work. Like the first time a musician encounters their instrument. It becomes their muse. They work to understand it and learn as much as they can about it. My particular muse was the IBM Model MTSC Magnetic Tape Selectric Composer Programmable Electric Typewriter. There were like 3 or 4 major parts to this behemoth. And when Big Hoss went to work, man, he bellowed loudly across that office, singing about his mechanical prowess like a majestic baritone delivering his rendition of La Boheme. Don't read this wrong. I never thought I wanted to work on those machines per se, but something about being able to craft something using nothing but my mind in a format that felt kind of native to me, that part resonated really loud and clear. Actually, really loudly. That machine was loud as shit. But it just performed its job with this kind of ruthless efficiency, laying waste to the typing speed and accuracy of the fastest human typists. This was the first thing close to a computer I'd ever seen, and I was hooked. And from there, I wouldn't really touch or see another computer for a few years. Now, when my next encounter did occur, it was a dashing and comparatively svelte Apple II Plus, resplendent with his dashing rainbow ribbon cable scarf, who caught my eye. All right, I'll stop. There was always some kind of different energy with me when a computer was involved. I began this obsession when I was 11 when my grandmother bought me a TI 99-4A Texas Instruments personal computer. I wrote a game that I made like $50 on when I was a teenager, and the hook was set. After my first job fell apart, I drifted around quite a bit. I tried to make college work while holding down a full-time job and living on my own, but I wasn't able to find something where I could pay my bills and get my education at the same time. I applied everywhere I could, and the answer was always, sorry kid, no degree. Back then, I had these visions I was going to change the world somehow. It was the 90s. Shit was popping. My skills at the time were in demand, and there were a few times in there I thought I was close to my big break. I interviewed with a startup down in Florida. They flew me in for the day and even had a driver waiting for me at the airport. That day-long interview was unique in a number of ways, but I knew about an hour into the whole process the job was mine. There was some really long psychological assessment that they gave me that was supposed to determine how well I could fit into their company culture. They'd contracted with an outside firm that determined what the company would need to be a success, and based on some questionnaire, all the employees were assessed for their overall fit. Most employees scored in the 70s or low 80s. There were a couple of folks in the very high 80s, and the CEO and founder had the high score at 92. I was told I shouldn't be concerned in any way if my score wasn't congruent with the rest of the staff. I just needed to answer the questions. My score was a 94. The owner of the company appeared completely flabbergasted. Or at least, he was a decent actor about it all. His staff all legitimately appeared to be in shock. The man who would have been my boss, the CIO, pulled me aside and we chatted about a couple of things. He sent some very clear signals this was the start of something big for me. We grabbed a drink at a bar on the way back to the airport, and he expressed a lot of interest in what he thought I brought to the role, and my head barely fit onto the plane coming home. I've known what I'm capable of my entire life, and now validation at this scale was in my grasp. My offer letter arrived by FedEx 1 day later. I was ecstatic. I went out, I bought a 6-pack, and I called my buddy Blair to strategize. The experience was disappointing, to say the least. And of course, Blair was less than sympathetic. He turned it all into a big joke. Listen, that shithead is getting his own episode now that I figured out how not to cry my ass off when I talk about him. I miss you, you fucking asshole. I do love the guy, I have to say that. My offer included no relocation, a job role that was not congruent with what was discussed, and a salary that was way off what I'd estimated. The story I was told was that the board did not want to risk giving the role I'd spoken to them about to someone without a degree. It was a senior role, and the lack of a degree was the deal breaker. The CIO tried hard to sell me. I'd have opportunities to move up in time, but the role we'd specifically discussed was the one I wanted, the one I deserved, the one I had abundantly proved my capability to perform over the course of a 7 or 8 hour visit. That role, I was not getting that role. Based on a 45-minute systems review they did with me, I had options for them on the spot. I mean, probably not real game-changing options, but we all knew I was on to something. I was kind of like, how am I supposed to prove to you I can do things you already watched me do? I mean, come on. There are a few .com 1.0 stories in there too. There were a couple of things that happened in that period I would have sworn would have taken off. Stories for other times. I did some fun shit back then. I've tried to get a few of the folks from that era on here to talk about things, but that shit was 30 years ago. Nobody wants to hear old person stories now. We've all adapted and moved on. They're right, I've adapted too. I've gone from working individually to understand how to get one computer to do magical things, to getting networks of computers together to enhance those magical effects, to getting rid of traditional servers altogether and the work being done every day. That's another episode though. This chapter takes place in the gap between official IT jobs 1 and 2. I'd gone back to working the parts counter at a local car dealership, doing everything I could to keep my skills relevant off hours. At some point, I ended up working retail software part-time. Boy, man, talk about your obsolete, dead-end career paths. This was like 1992 or 93. No Amazon.com was around then. No immediate download of that must-have application. Well, not at scale at least. No worrying about what some jerkwad auto parts salesman was doing to the pirated copy of Leisure Suit Larry you just downloaded. Which, by the way, was nothing more than breaking copy protection in my circumstance. I'd go on those early boards, find the disk images for copy protected software, figure out how to hop over the copy protection, add in some nifty little crack screen, and upload my wares to pirate boards. In those days, viruses were really weird. Most of the people writing viruses targeted things they knew saw a lot of downloads. You know, the more downloads, the higher the rate of infestation. And the infestations themselves didn't really expose the massive risks impacting broad swaths of society like they do today. It's still early going at this point. This is also kind of how and around the same time I met Blair. No spoilers today, though. Sometime in 93, I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina to be the assistant manager of the software store there. If you're not familiar, the Research Triangle Park area of North Carolina is where a lot of really cool tech came from back in the 90s. I'll dig more into my Raleigh misadventures over time. Suffice it to say, I learned tons while I was there. Eventually, I became store managers of one of the stores in Richmond, Virginia. And it was on one day, as I was sitting in the manager's desk area of the store, when one of the people working for me asked how to answer a question for a caller. I picked up the phone to discover this caller was in desperate need of programming help. They needed to find a contract resource to come in and put out a series of major issues with their application. They were a small firm working on a pretty meaningful contract they had. They were wondering if people that came in the store left business cards with us, offering things like programming and computer repair service, stuff like that. But without hesitation, I informed them that I, in fact, possessed the skills that they needed. At the time, I was very fluent coding in C, and I was getting just enough information from our conversation. I felt decent about the problems they were seeing. There was a bit of reluctance on their part at first, but what the hell? Eventually, they asked me about my rate, and I immediately said $75 an hour plus expenses. I mean, hey, if you're going to go big, right? The voice on the other end of the phone was like, $75 an hour, huh? Okay, wow, we're going to need to talk about that. We'll be back in touch soon. My coworker was like, $75 an hour? Are you fucking kidding me? Holy shit, dude, that's $150,000 a year. I knew this wasn't going to be a year-long engagement, but I didn't want to seem desperate either. I needed to find the line between being taken seriously and being seen as ripping them off. A couple hours later, they call back, and they agree to a very time-capped arrangement. For no more than 30 days, I'd commit 2 days a week to being in their office. In that 30 days, there were clear objectives I had based on their assessment of where things stood. And nothing up front money-wise. I'd be paid when the contract was over. I felt like if I had any shot at legitimacy, this was it. I arrived for my first meeting with them awkwardly overdressed for the occasion. In my quest to appear like a legitimate computer consultant, I wore this poor-fitting suit and tie. I met the owner, who pressed me for a lot of answers during our 45-minute session in his office. They were still kind of feeling me out. Eventually, I was shown into the developer's area and directed to the lead developer's workstation. The lead developer very calmly explained to me what was going on, the changes they had made, the stuff they had tried, etc. And 20 minutes later, there I was, all alone in their developer area, working on someone else's computer, and I went to work. The first problem I had tackled was a bit tricky, but it was really nothing compared to the second and third ones I tackled for them. They had some easy stuff, like some library path problems that were messing up their build, so I got those sorted out for them. And after what felt like an insanely long amount of time, I had a working build for them in just under 3 hours. The thing I'd assumed, hell, that they had assumed, was that this was going to take some time, and I had it resolved in less than half a day. And all I could think to myself was, way to go, genius. You could have done okay for yourself and probably schmoozed your way into a longer-term gig. But no, you just had to go and fix this in 3 fucking hours. Enjoy your $225. So I sat there for a moment and I pondered, okay, so what happens now? I knew I was ready for this moment. I'd shown those cats in Florida this is what they would have gotten from me, and now I'd shown a second company, but what was I going to have to show for it at the end of it all? I stewed on it a bit, but I had figured one thing out that was pretty big, so I did kind of want to brag about that a bit. So I decided to demo it, except everyone had already left for lunch. So I ran down the street and grabbed something, but I left them a note directing them to a demo I had set up for them. When I got back, there was a buzz coming from the developer area, and everyone was eager to see me and see my demo. I figured, gee, I would have thought you would have run things on your own. When I said I got it working, that's what I meant. I built and created an executable file. I named the icon Click Me on their desktop, just like in the note I'd left. There was a bit of a confused look on everyone's face. When you say built it, does that mean we'll be able to produce an executable? Of course. I mean, what else would it mean, right? You see, for quite some time, that team had been unable to build executables of any form, mostly because of the path issues, but also because of one really gnarly bug I inadvertently fixed for them while I was going back and looking through their code. It was C, it was a pointer issue, enough said there. Keep in mind, this was 3 or 4 people working on a Windows client app. Nothing approaching the complexity of anything comparable nowadays. These people were all used to clicking the run icon within their IDEs and demoing the features that way. They had so many problems, they hadn't thought about trying to put together an executable yet. And they knew specifically to stay away from one feature because it would regularly crash the entire system. That feature with the jacked up pointers. If you've written C code, you get it. With me standing there, they double clicked on the icon and kind of oohed and awed a tiny bit as the splash screen kind of announced its progress. The program in question basically followed a series of numerically named image files stored in a series of folders on a disk. An image would be displayed, and a context-sensitive set of keystrokes would aid your navigation. An enter key selected the image, and then within that sort of like selected or zoomed view of the image, you could kind of, zoom in and out. You could navigate around different parts of the image, and you could use keys to select areas of the image to scan for words. I'm screwing up parts of this, but you get the idea. At first, their collective silence was very off-putting. I mean, it was working, wasn't it? Wasn't this the expectation? I mean, sure, my dreams of being an IT superstar would be on hold again, but at that point, like, any level of validation would be nice. One of their engineers kind of looked at me and said, wait, you got the OCR working too? Excuse me, did you say two? I'd found a bunch of code they had remarked out because it referred to a library that was missing from one of their paths. This issue was prevalent on all their dev machines, and since they were having so many other issues, they blocked it out, decommitted to delivering it just because it wasn't working. And I fixed it by tracing out the path issues, resolving them, then going back to all the places they had remarked code and adding it back. They'd remarked out some foundational things that were really preventing the app from running, trying to troubleshoot all these other path issues they kept having. Finally, after a few minutes, the lead developer looks at me and goes, "But how?" And in that moment, all that energy I knew was there when I was 7 years old came out. Validation. There are no words to express the pure elation I felt in that moment. Now, am I romanticizing this? Yeah, probably a little, but I knew I'd made an impact, and that was the first time that I had been validated in real time like that right in front of me. The owner of the company stayed pretty quiet through this whole thing. He walked out for a second, conferred with a couple of people, and then asked me to join him in his office. I was followed by the lead engineer, the business lead for the company, and the lady from HR whom I'd spoken to on the phone. I figured it would be, here's your check for $225. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Instead, I was asked to take a look at a short list of features that they had backed off on, including the OCR, because of all the build issues they were having. And by 5 o'clock on that first day, I had everything but maybe 2 or 3 of those features implemented. Now, in complete fairness, a lot of the work had been done already, but it was another moment where I'd met their expectations a lot faster than either of us expected. And again, I thought I was performing myself out of a job. This would be a story I could tell, but it would never end up where I had hoped. I don't have that degree, so no one is ever going to take my work seriously. Now, I'm happy to say this story ended well. I was very lucky, kind of strategic, and had some pretty decent timing. Most people in this situation are nowhere near as fortunate as me. Eventually, we renegotiated my $75 an hour to something more sustainable, and I signed a contract to help them out with even more stuff. That turned eventually into a full-time opportunity, which in turn led to all the opportunities I mentioned before, and eventually to where I am today. Now, will there be comments like, sounds like a pretty crappy dev shop if they couldn't figure out a path issue? I hope not. These are all great people. They all taught me a ton. They were stressed. I can't tell you how many times I've watched really good developers, including myself, get stymied by the smallest things. So there it is, how to have a successful career in IT in just under 40 years. Now, obviously I left out a lot of war stories about trying stuff, breaking stuff, fixing stuff. But there it is for the rest of the internet. Hopefully that was at least somewhat entertaining. As always, thanks for listening. Take care.